Have you ever been in a situation where you're supposed to have a conversation with a kid and you have no idea what to do? You know, when you have a small group, there's 8 of them, they're all coming in, you're ticking them off, and then there's this time for pastoral time or connection time, or you're just standing in a queue for something and you think, I really should be talking to these kids, but I'm not really sure how. That space that you have can be one of the most significant times that you get with those kids. And here's how to make them really useful. In Parenting for Faith, we talk a lot about surfing the waves. It's a tool that we use to sort of jump on board with whatever is going on in the kid's life, have a really good conversation about it to help them sort of take the next step in their faith and to explore. And one of the gifts that God has given these kids is you. You in your ordinary, imperfect life, walking alongside of them can be really significant to them. So when you have these opportunities for conversation, take them. And here's how. First, ask good questions. Because if you're like me, your default question is, how's school going? Or something that's sort of activity-based, which is great if you have talkers, but if you don't have kids who are talkers, then you can sort of run into a wall. Fine, you get the answer, and then you think, well, I don't know where to go from there. So come up with sort of open-ended questions or questions that come at it from a different route, like, what was one thing that surprised you this week? Or what was one time you felt misunderstood this week? Or if you could change one thing that happened this week, what would you have changed? Things like that, which open up a different conversation than just report to me your week, and then I'll pick from that. So when you get the kids talking, you can begin to pull out those kind of questions. The second thing you do is sort of surf the wave of whatever comes up. You may find out about activities like funerals or tests or places they went or things they're excited about. You may find out pastoral things like what they were really upset about or something that happened that was great or a thing they're worried about. So whatever pops up, sort of notice what is coming. Notice what is happening underneath the information. Notice what their face is doing and what their words are saying, because you might find that you're accessing something that they're feeling or pondering that's sort of underneath the actual answers. And then ask more questions that get the kids talking more. I call it digging. The third thing is to dig. Because while you get the information, it's important to say, tell me more about this. You were mentioning that you were going to a funeral. Tell me more about that funeral. Whose funeral is it? How do you feel about that? Are you feeling excited about it or worried about it? If you could make sure one thing happens at the funeral, what would you really want to make sure happens? You have all of those digging questions that you can find out more. Tell me more about this. How do you feel? Do you feel more this or that? What would you change? All of those open-ended questions really allow children to feed into what's happening. And then tell them your stories. Sometimes we just feel like we're extracting information from them to get talking, but conversation is a conversation. It's 2 ways, which means you can share things. And this is where you become really powerful, because you have stories in your life that can help frame for these kids how God could look in those situations. You have the opportunity to create windows into your life to say, this is where God is for me, and something that looks similar to that. So tell a story that is related to that. For instance, I was just hanging out with some kids the other week, and we were talking about our mornings. How was your morning? How was your morning? How did you sleep? And one kid, we were talking about, what time do you normally get up in the morning, was the question I asked. And one kid said, I woke up very early this morning at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I thought, that's interesting, because she looked frustrated by that. So I began to dig, and I said, is that normal for you? She's like, no. I just woke up and I couldn't get back to sleep, and it was so frustrating. And other kids began to chip in with their morning stories of what they do in the morning and how it was like. And I began to think about what happened to me that morning. And so I said, I know. I woke up really early this morning too, except I had a nightmare this morning. And so I told them about my nightmare. I was about to preach, and I was saying that that morning before the preach, I woke up from this nightmare that the one of the leaders was going to wake up and start yelling at me that I was unbiblical. And I couldn't go back to sleep for ages, and I tried really hard, and I could tell I was being afraid. And so then I just started like telling God, I don't know, am I not supposed to preach? I freaked out at God for a little bit, and then I just put on one of my worship songs, listened to that for a while till I got back to sleep. That's what I tend to do. What do you do when you can't get back to sleep? And then we were in this conversation about how God works and what he does in the middle of the night. And it was a conversation about something little and silly. And yet we had a great conversation about where God is when you're struggling to sleep. And so whether it's that or whether it's funerals, whatever you have in these conversations, these great opportunities to connect with kids. So ask interesting questions and dig when you find something interesting. Get more information. Create windows into your life and take that conversation forward. So whether you have 8 kids in front of you or 1, you can have this significant moment where you create a window into your life and encourage them in theirs as you co-journey together.